Welcome to the ReaderHouse Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. There's an imaginative adventure in the new book written by Aurora. It's titled Faucet, For We All Have the Power to Glow. And we're going to be talking all about this. The author, Mara, is here with me now. Mara, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I really appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you being here with me and let me know all about Faucet. Can you tell me about this book, Mara?
Yes. So the story is about the power of a child that he or she has not even experienced yet. This resilient little boy has to overcome novel situations, including fear of the unknown. As he falls into a deep sleep, he is encountered by a kind, unexpected character who looks unlike anyone he knows. But this character, Faucet, needs to go on an adventure to find his best friend, a Bendiglow. With the power of this little boy, he will be able to accomplish his mission. But without the little boy, nothing would ever be able to take flight. So the little boy, who is actually the main character, gains a friend and a new confidence. And at this point, he cannot wait for others and his friends to see him. One very important point of the story is courage, and that the antagonist is not a person, but instead it's the emotion of fear. And in the end, he knows he can call on his friend Faucet if he would ever like to join again. So this story creates a sense of power and wonder, and for this little boy to glow, shine, and stand out above others, because that's his destiny, as others can relate to their destiny on their journey in this life, no matter their age.
Wow, that sounds wonderful. Mara, what sorts of readers is this book for?
I would say children, ages birth to 12, honestly, parents, adults, probably all walks of life, teachers, therapists, educators. I think the title resonates resilience, facing big and little challenges, fear of overcoming the unknown, courage, and just being a beacon of hope and being the light that shines in this world.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me about Faucet, where this idea came from?
Absolutely. So with Faucet, there's a few things. So as far as my personal life and my professional life, I've worked with kids with developmental disabilities and autism, grieving families, and I have a bachelor's in psychology from APU. And personally, I survived a home invasion and a house fire, just untouched. So resilience and courage is the epitome of this book. I took a children's literature class, which inspired me. A pastor at my church told me personally that I needed to write a book, which is my confirmation since no one knew my greatest desire. And I know that when something is placed in your heart, nothing can stop the wheel from turning. So it is your destiny. A few other things, it's COVID, its effects. Just seeing depression go up, identity confusion, watching a lost generation, giving back and telling children to be you. And there is a power within yourself that you just need to find it. So I think that this story, the character I created when my boys were, as I call them, tiny guys, but now they're teenagers, they still remember his name and the adventures. And I've always had a desire to write children's books. So just helping children with inclusion, empowerment, and well-being.
So this is your first published work then?
It sure is, yes. It's my first one, but I like to say not my last one.
How long of a process was this for you, the writing and publishing, the whole thing?
For me, I wrote it in my heart and in my head, but on paper, it took about an hour. I did all the illustrations, so I drew everything. So it's a combination of both of my teenage boys' rooms when they were younger, and the character was created with that combination of athletics and some sports. It took about 5 months, I would say, with Christian Faith Publishing.
Well, this book sounds really wonderful. The message is great. I think a lot of readers are going to be into it. Again, it's titled Faucet, For We All Have the Power to Glow. It's written by Aurora and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so find it at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Mara, thank you again for coming on the show and telling me about Fawcett and all your work. I just had a really nice time tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Author Caleb Glaser has written a new book. It's titled No Second Coming, and it's a retelling of the story of Zacchaeus from the Bible. We're going to talk all about this book. Caleb is here with me right now. Caleb, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Corey.
Absolutely. Can you tell me all about No Second Coming and what readers are going to find here?
Well, it's really a book that is going back to look at this story that so many people know and so many people have heard for thousands of years now, but it's looking at it sort of in a different way. And it's looking at this story of a man who was a tax collector, which at the time is just not a well-respected profession in his part of the world, although it was a very successful profession, but not well-respected. And what makes someone like that, who's very successful, but not very well-respected, go and climb up a tree to see this sort of nomad prophet who is wandering around ancient Judea? That's what it's about. It's taking a look at how this man got to the point in his life where not only was he in this position of having this sort of interesting and controversial career, but also what made him then climb up a tree, which is sort of an undignified thing to do, to get just a glimpse of this man who had a different message for people.
What sorts of readers do you think would be really into this, Caleb?
I think anyone who has ever been touched by the story of Jesus or the idea of Jesus on any level would love this book, honestly. I think a lot of people who are Christians tend to fall into that category, but I really think anybody. I don't think it's strictly a Christian book. It's really a book that is for anybody who has been struck by the story of a man who spent his life, dedicated his life to really living life differently and trying to convince other people to do that in a way that no one really was doing at that time. I mean, in this day and age, we have the benefit of 2,000 years of humanism, a lot brought about by the life of Jesus. But at the time, it was something radical and something new and something that was revolutionary. And so I think that really, in one way or another, has influenced almost everyone's lives in today's world. And so I think in that light, I think anybody could pick this book up and really find it enjoyable.
And once you sat down and got started on this, Caleb, how long of a journey was this for you, clear up until it was published and out there for people?
Yeah, good question. To be honest, I'm not even positive myself. It's such a long process. You don't tend to keep a timer with this kind of stuff. But I think initially it started several years ago with a bunch of conversations I had with a dear friend of mine who is a 94-year-old priest. And we began having all these conversations about what would it mean if there is a God? And what would it mean if that God really were all loving? What does it mean that Jesus was a human being? What does that mean for us? And what does that make us? And who are we? And these kind of conversations spurred on this kind of creative thought. And what we finally came to in those conversations was that the only answer to that really that we could come up with to all those questions is, if you're looking for God, the only place to find God is in the person in front of you. That is really the heart of the book, and that's where the book came from. So it came from those conversations, and then it was about almost a 2-year process to write it and rewrite it and edit it and get it published. So it was a long process.
Have you given thought to maybe writing a follow-up to this or doing some other kind of writing in the future?
Yeah, I have another book in the works right now. It has nothing to do with this. It's not historical fiction. It's actually a sort of a political thriller.
Well, I think this is a book a lot of readers are going to be interested in, and I encourage everyone listening to go check it out. Again, the title is No Second Coming. It's written by Caleb Glaser and published by Covenant Books. So you can find it everywhere, like head on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores, and you'll be able to pick it up. Well, Caleb, thanks again for coming on the show and telling me all about this. I had a really nice time talking with you tonight.
It was great talking to you, Corey. Appreciate it.
Sitting down with me now, right here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, is author Tanya Inks. Tanya, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. This is fun.
It is a lot of fun, and I just wanted to say congratulations. You have a new book out called Buttercup and Violet, The Daisy Disaster, a Flower Fairy Adventure, Book 1. Tanya, can you tell me about this?
Yeah, it's one of actually 3 that I have out now, all about Buttercup and Violet, who are flower fairies. And I started telling these stories to my daughter just off the top of my head when she was a little girl. She always said, "You really should write these down." So COVID sort of allowed me to write them down. So that's what I did. I also taught myself how to watercolor paint and do all the illustrations myself.
Oh, wonderful. Tanya, would you say this is something for younger children or a little bit older children?
A little bit older. It's probably for kids who are going maybe not quite ready for chapter books, but close, and or parents who want to read to their kids. The children may not be able to read the text themselves, but there's lots of pictures, so a parent could read them to their child.
Tanya, what does your writing background look like? Prior to this, have you done much of this kind of thing?
Not children's books prior to this. I'm actually a geophysicist, and I've written a fair amount of technical papers, which are not at all the same.
Yeah, a little bit different here.
Yeah, they're a little more fussy about exactly what you write about.
Exactly. Now, once you sat down and got started on Buttercup and Violet, how long of a process was this for you, clear up until it was ready to go out?
It wasn't too long. I think probably about a year between when I started putting it together and when it actually came out as a book. It takes a little bit longer because I do all the illustrations. And of course, illustrations are time-consuming.
Yeah, definitely. And when it came to that publishing process, you said you were doing the illustrations, and there's just so much more involved in that. What did you find the most challenging part about that publishing end?
Probably understanding the process, since this was my first book. I didn't really have a feel for exactly how the process worked, and now after 3 of them, I'm, kind of feel like I'm getting to be an old hand at how it works from beginning to end, and, what I need to do to get it, actually into a book form.
I could only imagine what you were feeling and what was going through your head when Buttercup and Violet finally came in. You got to hold it for the very first time and look at it. What was holding that first copy like for you?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was really very special having it come to fruition and being able to show it to people and having my friends, ooh and ah over the book. And several of them, immediately went out and bought them, sometimes when they didn't even have kids. So I have some fast fans. You have to admire somebody who's willing to go out and read a children's book just because it sounds interesting, even if they're not a kid.
Well, now that you are a published author, Tanya, what's the most rewarding aspect about that for you?
I think just knowing that they're in print and that if my daughter has kids someday, they'll be there for her kids and for her kids' kids, that they'll be hopefully around for a while and sort of a legacy, I guess. Maybe something more lasting than anything else that I do other than having my daughter.
So this is 3 books in the series. Do you have anything planned after this? Do you think there'll be more, or you might be doing some other kind of writing?
Well, I think there'll probably be more Buttercup and Violet stories. I think I probably have several more in the hopper. I don't know. I just feel like, at least when my daughter was little, that she really enjoyed the series where she could finish one and then what else is happening to them, where they can go back to the shelf and say, oh, there's a new one out, I haven't read this one. I can read this one. And, if they start to develop a rapport with the characters, they want to know what happens next and what else they're doing. Hopefully that will happen with children and these characters, that they're interesting enough and fun enough to really enjoy being with them in their little fairy world.
Well, this sure sounds like a book and a whole series that I think readers are going to enjoy. Again, it's called Buttercup and Violet, The Daisy Disaster, a Flower Fairy Adventure, Book 1. It's written by Tanya Inks, and is published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can find it everywhere you usually go to pick up your books, like on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Tanya, it's been so nice talking with you tonight and learning all about your work. Thanks so much for joining me again.
Oh, it's nice to meet you.
There's a new, thrilling novel that author Anthony Huey has just put out. It's titled Probability. And I'm going to find out all about it. The author, Anthony, is sitting here with me now. Anthony, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I really appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited to learn all about probability. Can you tell me what readers are going to find here, Anthony?
I think readers are going to find a kind of a roller coaster ride of a story. It's the first of a trilogy, so there's a lot more to come, but as a good introduction story, it's definitely a lot of action, some twists and turns, and it's definitely not what you think when it first starts.
Anthony, what sorts of readers do you think would be really into probability?
I think readers who are into paranormal, mind-bending, definitely action readers. At the root of it is a very tender story in the heart of it, so it kind of combines all those elements. There's a lot of elements to it.
And how did the idea for this come about?
I've had a number of ideas in my head for different topics, different books, and I just wanted to have a story for myself. I love sci-fi. I love a mind-bending kind of story, so I wanted to have one for myself that I could come up with. Where it starts and where it ends are two different things. It's a long story, so I had to put it in different parts. So that's why it's a trilogy.
So prior to this first one, Probability, in the series, what does your writing background look like? Have you done much of this prior?
I published a previous book. It's called White Stetsons. And it's actually, that book is a semi-autobiographical story regarding myself and my father and just our relationship. He's passed away now, but it was about him dealing with Alzheimer's. So that was my first book. And once I got that published, it kind of lit a fire in me to continue with my writing.
Wonderful. And once you sat down and got started on Probability, clear up through when it was published and went out there for the world, Anthony, how long of a process was that?
Really, it wasn't that hard of a process because I already had the whole entire story in my mind. I knew exactly how it was going to start and how it was going to finish. All the intricacies of it, I kind of picked up along the way and just find ways to structure it. So each part of the trilogy would be just as good as, if not better than the previous one.
What's it like whenever you've been working on a novel all that time and finally that day comes and you get your first copy in and you finally get to hold it in your hands? What kind of a moment's that like?
Well, I won't say it's hard to explain, but it is a magical feeling to have something that you have an idea or a concept in your mind, craft it, make tangible, someone else to tangibly get that idea, read it, and it becomes what you had in your mind becomes a part of them and gets in their mind. And it's just an incredible process, and it's very addictive. Once you get that rush, holding that book, what was once just ideas in your head, and there it is in pages in black and white in the palm of your hand, it's nothing like it.
And being a published author, Anthony, whenever you think of that, what's the most rewarding thing about that for you?
The feedback, just the idea of people seeing what you have seen. I've been writing for years. I used to write for fun, like in the early days of social media, Facebook. I used to write little stories regarding things I saw on my job. And friends would always tell me, you should write a book. The stories would be really incredible stories, and they would say, you should write a book. And when I finally decided, hey, I should write a book, to see that actually become a reality, it's nothing like it.
When you think of that publishing end of things and how much is involved there, what do you find the most challenging part of that for you?
Being grounded in my expectations. I'm not a celebrity, but, being a first-time writer, my job is to get you to know me and to build a reputation from the ground up. So it's a challenge.
Well, this sounds like an exciting novel. I think so many readers are really going to be into it, and I encourage everyone listening to definitely check this out. The title of the book is Probability, and it's written by Anthony Huey, and it's published by Newman Springs Publishing, so you can find it everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Anthony, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I had a nice time finding out about Probability and learning about your work. Thanks again for being here with me.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Author Pamela S. McNeal's new book, The Dog Who Tried, is a sweet story of a little dog who keeps trying even through uncertainty. And the audiobook edition just came out. We're going to talk all about this. Pamela, the author, is with me now. Pamela, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Corey. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Pamela, can you tell me what readers and audiobook listeners can find whenever they check out The Dog Who Tried?
They will find an interesting little story about a little dog who, in my opinion, represents our kids of today. And he has just a hard time in his young little life trying to fit in his opinion. And in the book, he's on a quest and he learns some things. Even though you find your quest, it's very important to have knowledge that sometimes even if you do find what you think you need, you're still going to have some things to work on.
Pamela, what gave you the idea for this story? What was that spark?
So the original idea came from a third grade assignment, truth be known. I will never forget that time in my life. It was an assignment that was given to us. We were to write a little short story. I was extremely overwhelmed. I think I was 8 years old because I was in third grade. And basically I came up with something. I liked dogs, and I took it from there. I lived in a suburban city in Minnesota. And I just took it from there, and I said, well, I like dogs, and let's just do this. And when I submitted it, it was, 2-3 pages, what have you. And it ended up getting an A, and I was shocked. That's the original idea that this book came from.
Well, what sparked you to pick this back up again after all those years and have it published?
Well, it happened around, I want to think it was 2008. And I had always wondered, I wonder if I could ever write or be an author, because I knew I liked to write. And I started some ideas, writing it down. I said, I can make it a full children's book. And so what I did is I it took me about a couple of months or so, and I started picking some characters because I knew I had to have another couple of characters. So what I did, I went from keeping it simple. I collect butterflies, so I incorporated a butterfly in there. I like dogs. Of course, he's the main character. There is also a cockatiel bird in there. I owned one. He was so special to me. And I just put them all together and expanded on the original idea and completed it as being a full children's book.
You originally wrote this in third grade. Would you say that's about the age that you were going for here?
Approximately. My original idea is like between 5 and 9. But truth be known, I had just given one of my books away to a general manager of a local place here. And she has 6 grandchildren, and what they do every Friday night is they have Grandma read a book because they are all book lovers. And I told her, I said, what do you think, 5 to 9? She says, actually, my 3- and 4-year-old enjoyed the book when I read it. And I said, oh, really? So that was very enlightening because it has been read a couple of times before I published it because it was a simple concept. But finished, I think her feedback was the first feedback to hear what her 6 grandchildren from the ages of 3 to 10. So I believe I got the right target readers.
Fantastic. So is this your first book, Pamela? Have you ever done anything like this before?
I have not. I have never written. I knew I enjoy writing all of my life. I wrote more when I was younger than I do now because you're engaged in life, work, and all that. But yes, this is something that was quite a spectacular surprise to even myself.
What do you say the chances are that you might be doing it again? Do you think you got another book in you?
I do believe I have. I've got a couple of ideas that I've been working with, nothing set in stone yet, and I do want to do another book. My challenge right now is what direction do I want to go with the book? Do I want to continue with what the main characters are doing? And yes, I have been writing down ideas already for another book.
Fantastic. Well, I think children are really going to love this book. I encourage everybody listening to seek it out. Again, this is The Dog Who Tried. It's written by Pamela S. McNeal and is published by the Audiobook Network, so go everywhere that you normally get your audiobooks and you'll find it, like Audible and iTunes and Amazon. Pamela, it's been really nice talking with you tonight. Thanks so much for telling me all about The Dog Who Tried. It was great having you on the show.
It was a pleasure sharing my story.
The new book by Joe Jackson tells of life-changing encounters he's experienced. It's titled My Encounter with Two Angels. And we're going to talk all about this right here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. The author, Joe, is with me. Joe, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm curious about my encounter with two angels. Joe, what can readers find here?
Okay, the book is like the title said, it's about my encounter with two angels at the age of 12. But it also covers about being abandoned or really left behind when everybody else went to another country. My stepfather was in the army, and I was left with my grandmother. And at that time, I got molested at like 5 years old. And so I had resentments about that. So it covers abandonment, being molested, running away at 11, survival, drug addiction, transformation. It just covers a lot of different topics.
Wow, quite the story. Joe, who are you writing for here?
Me. This is for me. And I remember I tuned in a couple of times to your show and just listened to a couple of people who's on there, and several times I heard people talking about someone died and they're finishing the book form. And that was one of my greatest fears, not being able to complete the book. I started writing this book at 60, and I'm 74 now, and I just kind of stopped. I said, nobody's going to read it, nobody's going to believe it and everything else. And I called a pastor I know, and he said, Joe, write your book. That's why nobody's going to believe it. He says, just go ahead and write your book. It doesn't matter. Write it. Plus, I couldn't sleep at night. I would stay awake a lot of times at night. This is years and years and years, not just the last 5 or 10 years, just for decades. And it would just always be on my mind, that incident that happened when I was 12 years old. I really believe the Holy Spirit guided me through this here, because I'm not a writer, and it was hard writing it, but, I did get it completed and everything else. And I got all the information I needed to get out there. And once I was able to write this book, then I sleep like a baby now. I just go to sleep. I don't have no thoughts about it. I just really sleep good now. It also covers about the 5 times in my life where I know I was going to be killed or I was going to die. There's 5 times for sure. And there's several times during the book that it could have went either way, but the 5 times for sure where I was going to be dead or die.
Wow.
And so it covers parts of that right there. It covers the drug addiction, being hooked on the crack when it first came out and everything. It was called freebase at that time. And when I had to stop smoking because I was on probation and everything else, and I started drinking a lot. And just about became alcoholic because I was substituting it for another drug, which was alcohol. So it shows how I handled that type of situation. And over the years, spending decades in prison. So I spent decades in prison and juvenile detention since 11. When I ran away, I was in a juvenile detention. Then I was old enough and going to the reform schools and then prison, so it covers all that too.
So this is your first book. You haven't published or written much before this?
No, didn't even care about writing that, but it just would not leave my mind. It just stayed on my mind, and I replayed the incident when I was 12 years old many, many times before, and it just was so hard to believe. I just said, man, this is hard to believe, and I just kind of suppressed it from when I was like 12. I just quit thinking about it. It's just too hard to believe. But over the years, as things kept going on and the different things and situations I was involved in, just about being killed and shot and, just all kinds of different things happened. And I was still here, and I said, somebody's looking out for me. Why am I still here at 74 when I didn't think I was going to live to be to 30? I was hoping I got to 30, but I didn't really think I would. So I was living really fast. Lifestyle was not a good lifestyle. I'm nothing I'm proud of. But the transformation that took place in prison and felt out what I was so angry about, I found all that about. And it's all in the book about dealing with anger and abandonment. It covers a lot of different things in the book. And then, once I finally do get out of prison in 2005, I found out I had cancer. I said, well, all these years, 20-some years in prison, I get out, now I got cancer. I thought I won't be around long. That's been back in 2005. So
wow.
God's been sparing my life. These angels have been around me my whole life. Honestly, they've been protecting me my whole life. At first, I thought I was just lucky, but once I started reflecting on my life, I said, man, you've been touched and held by an angel. I've heard about people that, get lost in the mountain or something like that, and somebody comes down and rescue them and everything else. But to be touched and held by an angel is something that, just kind of blew me away. It just kind of was hard to imagine, but it definitely happened. So.
Wow, this sounds like truly an amazing story of a transformed life, and I think readers are really going to love this. Again, it's titled My Encounter with Two Angels. It's written by Joe Jackson and published by Newman Springs Publishing, so you can get it everywhere. Head on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes. You'll be able to pick it up. Joe, thank you again for joining me, telling me about my encounter with two angels and everything. I had a really nice time tonight.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show, and I appreciate you guiding me right through it.
The audiobook edition of the book by Linda Mason. It's titled, There's Purpose in the Journey and the Destination. It's out now, and we're going to talk all about it. I'm talking with Linda right now. Linda, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here tonight.
I am certainly happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to be learning all about this book. Linda, what are readers and audiobook listeners going to find whenever they open up or they listen to There's Purpose in the Journey and the Destination?
Well, the narrative kind of unfolds amid a devastating storm. It serves as a kind of backdrop to highlight the dramatics of family relationships, particularly through the experience of a teenager named Sarah and her parents. And as the family is temporarily separated due to the storm, the suspense kind of builds from there, introducing some delinquent runaway teens and a pack of dogs whose interactions with characters kind of add depth to the plot. Through those dogs, they will serve as a major purpose as the plot kind of develops. It's kind of unusual, and it's creative fiction. It kind of keeps you on your toes, regardless of your age.
Linda, what sort of a target audience did you have in mind for this?
Well, the target audience really has to be over age 13 and their parents. Of course, adults young at heart are also targeted for the audience. Even though there are some light topics along the way, the plot kind of thickens and it touches on topics such as physical abuse, anger issues, severe depression, even premarital sex, teen pregnancy, homosexuality, death, forgiveness, and it's kind of a spiritual relationships along the way. So the target audience should be mature enough to handle those type of things.
Linda, what was that spark? What gave you the idea for the book?
Well, I have a background in early childhood ed. So most of my books are related to younger children, 12 and under. But this one, I kind of saw children, not just children, but teens, really having a difficult time with the things they were dealing with in life and sometimes even in homes, being abused or mistreated by even the people that they trusted. And so I kind of wanted to get into some details about how young ones can cope through living through situations like that. So that's what gave me a kind of idea to start writing about some of those types of things.
And once you got started on this, clear up until you had it published and it was ready to go out there, Linda, how long of a process was this for you?
Well, I didn't see the ending from the beginning. So once I started, I thought it would be just one book. This is an audiobook course, but when I first started on novels, I just thought about writing one. And then by the time I got to the end of one, there was another and another and another. It ended up being 5 novels to complete this series, the In His Grace series. From there, these were paperback or ebooks, but the book that we're talking about now is my first audio book. And so when I thought about the audiobook, I wanted to combine those 5 paperbacks into 2 audio books. The one that we're talking about now, There's Purpose, is a combination of 2.5 of those 5 novels. It didn't take very long to get that done because the plot and everything was already done.
And speaking of the audiobook edition, what was it like to hear your book as opposed to reading it like you're used to all that time?
Oh, my goodness. It was just, oh, my goodness. It's just unbelievable to hear it. I was not the narrator. And so going through the process of choosing a narrator and then hearing them actually be able to use different voices for different characters, and it was just fantastic. And through some of it, I have some sound effects along the way. And just to hear it, I'm still listening to it over and over again. It's just so fabulous to hear it and realize that I wrote it.
Again, it's titled There's Purpose in the Journey and the Destination. It's part of the In His Grace series. This is written by Linda Mason, published by the Audiobook Network, so you can find it at Audible, iTunes, and Amazon. Linda, thank you again for coming on the show and telling me all about this work. I had a really nice time talking with you.
Well, Corey, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to have me describe what's going on, and I can't wait until other people hear what is in this book. It will surprise you.
Author Essam Mengue has written a new book, and it's a true story of resilience in difficult circumstances. It's titled Dula Mengue, Mengue's Journey. And we're going to talk all about this. The author, Essam, is here with me now. Essam, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I appreciate you being here with me today.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be with you, and thank you for having me.
Well, the pleasure's all mine, Essam. Can you tell me about the book? What can readers expect in Dula Mengue, Mengue's Journey?
Okay. The book is basically a story of a young woman who was widowed at 26 with 4 children after her husband was killed in a traffic accident in the capital of Cameroon, Yaoundé, in the early 50s, in fact in 1952 precisely. She had gotten married very young. She didn't even finish primary school. And she found herself widowed with 4 children very young, the oldest one being barely 8 years old. So the problem was in a backward village where she had to go back to her own village, what to do with these children and with her life. So the question she asked herself was basically, what am I going to do with my life from now on? Before the death of her husband, she had suffered a number of other tragedies, like the death of her father, the passing of her only and younger sister, and then her mother being stricken by a terrible disease, which basically meant that she was lost for them. She had to be put in a special camp. So all of this affected her gravely and almost destroyed her. But she determined that she would not be destroyed, and she put the priority of her life in taking care of her children and making sure that they had a good education that her father had promised them, basically. So she worked like hell, excuse the term, to make sure that her vision for the good education of her children would be realized. She did various jobs. She was a seamstress, she was a car owner, she was a shop owner, she was a farmer, everything she could lay her hands on to make money. And also she determined that her children should go to the best school possible, whether it was especially the private ones, secondary schools, which were very expensive at the time. So she sacrificed her whole life from the age of 26 to ensure that her children had a future. Her children had opportunities to compete, and her children could succeed. Instead of feeling sorry for herself for the tragedy, she just said that she has to live for her children, and she succeeded beyond even her wildest dreams. Because one of her children did so well that he got admitted to an Ivy League school in the U.S. with full scholarship, because he worked very hard, and her mother pushed him to work very hard and sacrifice herself to pay for his education. So in a nutshell, it is a story of a determined woman in an environment that was, as you can imagine in those years, not very friendly to women, because she suffered a lot of cruelty from her in-laws, but she determined through resilience, vision, and hard work to make a future for her children, and she succeeded.
Mm-hmm. Essam, how did the idea come about to write this?
The idea came about because when my father passed, I was less than 5 years old. So I had a front row seat to all the dramas, tragedies, tribulations that my mother had, and I witnessed them firsthand. I could see that she really tried very much, the sacrifices that she made, and that inspired me, because a story like that, you don't find it every day, where a woman doesn't break down, doesn't become an alcoholic or even a man, but is resolved, takes a resolution to do something with her life and the life of her children. So that was the inspiration I got from what she did that led me to say that I need to document this so that other people and other women can learn about it, even though it took place in a French colony at the time in Africa.
How long did this take you once you started working on it, clear up until it was published and out there?
It took me a few months because I had a full-time job. I had to work on it on the side. I had it in me for many years, I have to admit to you. And I was hesitating between, should I publish it, should I write it down, should I do something? But once I took the decision to write it, it took me about 6 months to put it together.
Have you ever done anything like this before? Have you written or been published before this?
Never. And I published when I was already 75 years old plus, retired.
Well, this is a fascinating story of a truly strong woman, and I think a lot of readers are going to love it. Again, it's titled Dula Mengue, Mengue's Journey. It's written by Essam Mengue Mobama and published by Newman Springs Publishing, so you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Essam, thank you again for joining me tonight and telling me all about this fascinating story. I had a nice time.
Thank you very much, and all the pleasure is mine, and thank you for having me.
Author Lynn McIntosh has just released a book for young readers. It's a dystopian novel titled The History of Frogs. And we're going to talk all about this. Lynn is joining me now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Lynn, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you. It's so exciting to be with you.
I'm excited to learn all about the history of frogs, Lynn. Can you tell me about it?
Well, the history of frogs is based on an article I read about African clawed frogs and how their eggs are used to create artificial intelligence. And it's about how that artificial intelligence can be used for good or bad.
And what sorts of readers do you think would be into it?
Well, I think that 6th graders through 9th graders, juvenile readers who like science fiction, would really like the book.
And what does your writing background look like, Lynn? Have you done much of this before?
No, this is my first novel. I taught high school English for 32 years, so I have a background in English and in teaching young people to write. So that's my background.
Once you sat down and you got started on the history of frogs, clear her up through when it was published, Lynn. How long of a journey was that for you?
About 10 years. I enjoyed teaching and I spent a lot of time with my classwork and my students. So I wrote some a little at a time, and then when I saw this article on African clawed frogs and their eggs, I decided, wow, that would be a really good background for how the artificial intelligence was created and how young Americans could use that information to help save the United States from being destroyed by terrorists.
When it comes to the editing process, you get your manuscript done, you hand it to your publisher, and that long process of getting it ready for press begins. Lynn, what did you find the most challenging part of the publishing end for you?
Well, I think editing was very difficult for me. You just have to read your book over and over and over again and check that you're writing the correct grammar and language and that you're creating characters that are intriguing. So I think editing was the hardest part for me. But my publisher was very, very good. I really liked my publisher.
And there's nothing like seeing that finished product, especially after all the time and work that you put into this. So when that day came for you, Lynn, and you got your first copy and you got to hold the history of frogs right in your hand for the first time, what was that like?
It was very exciting. I was thrilled because, here's my little book, and I finally finished it. And, once you've done your completion, you feel like you've accomplished something. So that part was very fun. My niece and I just got together a couple of weeks ago, and she's really excited she's retiring from teaching, and she's excited about starting a book. And she said that she was so glad that I came to visit her and took her a copy because it's inspired her to write her own story. So I like that part.
And now it's official. You're a published author. To you, Lynn, what's the most rewarding aspect of it?
I think that being able to share my ideas with my friends and family and to, sign copies of the book and give them to people I care about, I think that was the most fun.
Would you do it again? Do you think you would write more?
I am working on the follow-up book for this called The Evolution of Frogs, so that we can continue on the journey and the kids who are involved in the book can create more ideas and, just to continue the story.
A lot of us authors, every once in a while, you get writer's block. You just can't figure out what to write. The words aren't coming out. Is that something you have to battle from time to time?
I do. I've been working on the second book for about 4 months, and it's taking its time. I'm a little slow, get a little writer's block, but then you'll think of something. I'll be falling asleep at night and I'll think, oh, she can do that. That's really fun too as well.
Well, I think a lot of kids are really going to be into this. Again, the title is The History of Frogs. It's written by Lynn McIntosh, published by Christian Faith Publishing, so it's available everywhere. You can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Lynn, thanks again for joining me and telling me all about the history of frogs. I had a really nice time.
Thank you. I did too. You have a great day.
Author John P. DiMarzio's new book. It's titled Diary of a Fool. It's a collection of diary entries, and it aims to keep readers from living as a fool. I'm going to find out more about this. The author, John, is with me. John, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. John, can you tell me all about Diary of a Fool and what readers can expect here?
The whole purpose, my intention of the book, is to help people not to live in the foolish lane. What it is, it's a discourse with a fool. We're talking back and forth, and it's showing the folly of living the life in the foolish lane. It shows that the fool is going down a path to nowhere. That's kind of my intent for the book.
John, what sorts of readers were you speaking to here?
Well, basically just about anybody that's interested in what God's Word is saying. My belief is that the Bible is philosophy, psychology, social, all wrapped up in that book. And my readers would hopefully be everyday people that are kind of looking at life and trying to evaluate, hey, where am I going?
So, John, what was that spark for you? What gave you the idea to sit down and get started on this one?
Over time, I just reading the Bible, just reading these passages, and I thought one day, if I could put all of these verses that talk about the foolishness, if I could put all those together and help people see the folly of the foolish lifestyle, I really think that this would be a good book if you are in a apologetics class. It's not necessarily apologetic textbook, but I think the contents of it will help take us in that type of direction.
Now, once you got started on this, clear up through when it was published and out there for readers, John, how long of a journey was this for you?
I've been thinking about it for a couple of years, but it actually took me a good year to just compile it. My daughter is my editor, and so she helps me with stuff like that. And it took me a good year to actually take all the thoughts that I've had over time and put them together.
Then you got your manuscript ready, you hand it off to the publisher, and that publishing process begins, and there's a lot involved in that. John, what did you find the most challenging part of the publishing end of things?
Actually, the part is just marketing it. I mean, I feel very strongly about the book. How do I get it out there to people? That's the difficult thing that I kind of struggle with, and I'm trying to find out ways to do that.
So that day finally came, John, and you open up your mailbox, and your first copy finally came in, and you're holding Diary of a Fool for the first time. What kind of a moment was that like for you?
It was exciting to see all the work that I put into it, to see it now come together. See, and one thing, too, is I was going to share this. In each discourse, there's some space at the bottom, where somebody could write, they could respond to that, and they could kind of reflect and say, am I living in that way? Or, they could rebuke it if they wanted to, do a rebuttal.
What does your writing background look like, John? Have you done much of this prior to Diary of a Fool?
Well, this is my third book. My first book was called The View from the Pew by Chaplain Johnny D., and that's a 30-day devotional book. We helped plant a church out here in southwest part of Fort Wayne, and I wanted to keep contact with the people. So I started writing something called Email Encourager, Southwind's Email Encourager. Just continued to write many, many of them. And I had several people say, well, why don't you publish it? In fact, one guy made a big donation saying, this is to help you publish it. So I published that book. Well, after I published that book, I kind of got excited about doing a little bit more. And then my next book was called Children Are a Heritage from the Lord. And this is a study guide. This is a book that's good to use in a classroom setting, and it has area for discussion. Then after that came Diary of a Fool.
So what's next? Have you given thought to writing more and publishing more after this?
Yes, I've been working on a book for a long time now, and I hope to get it done by the end of this year. It's going to be called The Fine Art of Forgiveness. I have all the material. I'm just working on now putting it in a format that will be helpful to people. That's going to be an exciting book.
Absolutely. There's definitely something we need more of nowadays.
The reason I write, I struggle with that.
I think we all do, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think a lot of readers are going to be into this book. Again, the title is Diary of a Fool. It's written by John P. DiMarzio and published by Covenant Books. So you can find it at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, and also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. John, thank you so much again for coming on the show and talking to me about all this. I had a really nice time.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I look forward to maybe some more interaction in the future.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.